The data the government's been waiting for shows those infected with Omicron are significantly less likely to go to hospital. New findings suggest it's a milder disease than Delta, but only if you've been vaccinated or reinfected.
It's really very good news. We need to be proportionate in our response, and I think that the restrictions that we have in place now go some way towards achieving that.
But it's not all good news. Today, the UK saw a record number of COVID cases, and both Wales and Northern Ireland announced new restrictions, also tonight. Experts approved the vaccine for the most vulnerable young children, but hold off rolling it out to all 5 to 11-year-olds. The online influencers caught breaking the rules, their posts banned by the advertising watchdog, and
truly scrumptious, you too are truly scrumptious.
A star of children's classic Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Sally Ann Howes, has died, aged 91.
This is the ITV Evening News with Lucrezia Millarini.
Good evening. For the first time in what seems like many weeks, there seems to be a glimmer of good news about Omicron tonight. Details of the long-awaited first authoritative study into its severity suggest it may be milder. According to the data, there is a significant reduction in the risk of hospitalisation for people who have been vaccinated or reinfected, as compared to the previously dominant Delta variant. But with COVID infections still rising steeply, new post-Christmas restrictions in England remain a possibility. For the first time since the pandemic began, the number of confirmed new cases in the UK topped 100,000. There were 140 further deaths, and ongoing concern over COVID led to new measures being announced for Wales today, as our political correspondent Daniel Hewitt reports.
As Boris Johnson continues to keep COVID under review, Wales will soon be back under more COVID restrictions.
Already we know that people are off work sick, putting essential services under strain. And after Christmas, we have to be prepared for that situation to worsen.
First Minister, you are moving to these much tighter restrictions at a time when the UK government says there simply isn't enough data to make such decisions. What do you know that they don't?
I think that the UK government is in a state of paralysis about all of this. We see the reports of infighting within the Cabinet, and I don't believe it's because they don't see the data. They see the data, but they're not prepared to act on it.
But Downing Street has insisted for days it's waiting for more data on the new variant, and in the last hour, more has emerged about its severity. New analysis shows the Omicron variant appears to be milder than the Delta variant. Early evidence suggests people are less likely to need hospital treatment, a reduction of up to 69% compared with other variants. And 2 doses of Pfizer, Moderna or AstraZeneca substantially protect against hospitalisation.
It's really very good news. We need to be proportionate in our response, and I think that the restrictions that we have in place now go some way towards achieving that. Now, many of people have been calling for more severe restrictions. The only issue is, of course, that we may need to be revisiting such restrictions next year, given depending on what kind of variants emerge.
Earlier in the day, the message from the government remained the same about post-Christmas restrictions.
As the Prime Minister has said, whilst there's no need for any further restrictions before Christmas, we will certainly keep the situation under review.
But whatever the data says, businesses need a plan for next week. In Manchester, Mo has stocked up his nightclub for New Year's Eve and sold hundreds of tickets for a night that may or may not go ahead.
The guidance is just terrible. We don't know what's happening. No one knows what's happening. Refunds are coming up now. Every single morning we wake up, there's an email saying, I want to cancel my ticket for New Year's Eve. I want to cancel this. I want to cancel table for New Year's Eve. I'm not going to be able to make it. So it's horrible. It's a horrible feeling.
And there are many more like Mo who will be spending this week praying for some post-Christmas clarity. Daniel Hewitt, ITV News.
Let's go to our health editor, Emily Morgan now. Emily, this new data seems like good news, is it?
Yeah, well, I think it's good news to a degree. It probably isn't the really, really good news that we were all hoping for. The data suggests that Omicron is only very, very slightly less severe than Delta. It's about a 10% reduction, which isn't brilliant, but it isn't bad. The risk of reinfection is also very high. It's about 5 times greater than Delta. But the good news is that if people have been vaccinated or if they have had a previous infection, there is a much greater chance that they won't need hospital treatment. It's about a 70% reduction, I think. And given the fact that over 80% of us have already had 2 doses of vaccine and we've had really, really high case rates for the last 6 months, so there's a good amount of natural immunity in this country, it does put us in a good position. The problem is there's an awful lot of people still in this country unvaccinated, a lot of people without natural immunity. So the government will be poring over this data over the next few days to see whether they need to bring in more restrictions. But with over 100,000 cases today and hospital admissions rising in London at the moment, there's an awful lot to think about.
Oh, it certainly is. Emily, thank you. Let's go back to Daniel Hewitt now. Daniel, the data on severity is what Boris Johnson was waiting for. So what does he do now?
That's right. We know the Cabinet has been split on this. That's been partly put down to why Boris Johnson has delayed making a decision. This will undoubtedly bolster those in the Cabinet that have been resisting more restrictions. It makes it harder, if the government does want to impose more restrictions and convince those Cabinet members. One thing we would say, though, is that this isn't the only data the government is currently looking at. Yes, Omicron may be less severe, but people are getting it at a much higher rate. And that is a big problem for the National Health Service. We have seen more and more staff go off sick. One study today suggested 1 in 10 NHS doctors are off work. We're expecting to hear see more data in the coming days on just how many members of NHS staff are having to isolate because of this. And that will impose huge pressures on the health service. So it isn't just the data of the severity the government will be looking at. The problem we have here is we just don't know how much data the government needs to look at because they haven't said.
All right, Daniel, thank you. So while Boris Johnson assesses this latest data, other parts of the UK already know how their lives will change going into the new year. We've got reporters in Cardiff and in Belfast tonight. First, let's go to Owain Phillips in Cardiff. Owain, why has Mark Drakeford decided to toughen the rules there?
Well, this does feel like a big moment for Mark Drakeford and the Welsh Government in dealing with this pandemic. And the First Minister says it's keeping key services going that's really driven this decision. Not just hospitalisations, but people ill and unable to go to work. For example, he said that some 7% of Welsh NHS staff are currently not in work. Mark Drakeford did take a swipe at Boris Johnson. He urged the Prime Minister to act immediately and was asking for furlough support. But for now, it seems that both Wales and England heading in very different directions in dealing with this new variant.
All right, Owain in Cardiff, thank you. Let's go to Tracy McGee now, who's in Belfast. Tracy, what's been announced for Northern Ireland today?
Well, Lucrezia, the news here is that the Omicron wave is now breaking in Northern Ireland today. The highest number of COVID cases were recorded here since the pandemic began. In the face of that, though, ministers have announced relatively tame measures. Nightclubs are closing, but hospitality and retail are staying open. Households are being asked to limit to just 3 families from Boxing Day, but all major sporting events are being allowed to go ahead. Ministers insist their response is balanced and proportionate, but it's pretty clear that the lack of funding from Westminster is playing into their decision-making. They're meeting again on the 30th. They'll be hoping they have more data and more money by then.
OK, Tracy in Belfast, thank you. The government did make one change to its English COVID restrictions today, but it wasn't to make things stricter. People will be allowed to come out of self-isolation after 7 days rather than 10 if they provide negative lateral flow test results. Juliet Bremner reports.
At the Purvis home in Middlesbrough, the Christmas spirit has been revived by this change in isolation rules.
What do you think of the news then?
John told his parents this morning that despite having COVID, he should now get home for the 25th.
Just the thought of you being on your own over Christmas would have been a disaster.
All he needs now are 2 negative lateral flow tests.
It's the best Christmas present I could get this year, I think, just to be able to go home and be with my family at Christmas and not be on my own.
From today, fully vaccinated people in England who test positive can cut their self-isolation from 10 days to 7. But that's only if they have 2 negative lateral flow tests on day 6 and 7, and they're still advised to limit social contact. The changes only apply to those who are vaccinated. Unvaccinated people still have to self-isolate for 10 days. At the Mellows Care Home in Essex, they've had to ban visitors after an outbreak of COVID. A result, the owner claims, of agency workers filling in for sick staff.
Difficult, very difficult. Every day, literally, one of us, even myself, literally involved in trying to get staff on board. And that's what we tend to do. We've got one person literally just doing that. And at the moment, that's me.
How much difference do you hope this shorter isolation period will have?
When you look at it in real terms, yes, it will be beneficial because at least we can get people back to work slightly early.
The new rules rely on people taking their own lateral flow tests, which public health experts warn can be flawed.
I think a shorter period, that is 7 days, people may be more likely to follow that. But whether they will actually carry out the letter of what's required in terms of 2 tests, and also they're advised to report the results of the test, which I think is something that not everyone will engage with.
That's for John.
But Alan and Angela Purvis are hoping the shorter isolation period will mean they can enjoy a family Christmas. Juliet Bremner, ITV News.
Well, in a step that's already been taken in other countries such as France and the US, vulnerable primary school children in Britain are to be inoculated against COVID. A specially adapted vaccine has been approved for children who are aged 5 to 11 and in an at-risk medical category or living with someone with a faulty immune system. Geraint Vincent has more.
Bradley Axtell's family have been shielding him through most of this pandemic, and with good reason. When the 10-year-old did go back to school last year, he caught COVID. His Down syndrome meant that doctors struggled to treat him. He kept pulling away his oxygen mask. After sedation, Bradley eventually recovered, but his mum has been waiting ever since for some good news about the vaccine.
It was a shock, but a really, really lovely shock. It's been quite annoying when every time you watch and hear someone say that the vulnerable have been protected, and you're thinking, no, they haven't, not everyone. And then they get the first vaccine, and then they get the second vaccine, and that they want to protect the vulnerable, and you're like, the vulnerable are still here, unprotected.
The new advice affects around 330,000 children aged 5 to 11 years old. The jab will be available to them if they are clinically vulnerable or they're in a household with someone who's immunosuppressed, and they'll receive a much smaller dose than adults.
I don't think parents should do anything now. They should wait to be called. The NHS will decide in due course when they decide to implement this recommendation, which may not be for a few weeks yet. So they shouldn't do anything at the moment, apart from making sure that, of course, that they're vaccinated themselves and boosted themselves.
Government advisors say they're waiting for more data before they decide whether to follow other countries in vaccinating all children. The possibility of more disruption to education remains.
The fact that it doesn't apply to all primary children means that it won't make much of an impact on reducing transmission in schools. And so, it could be a very tough term next term with lots of teachers testing positive.
It's not yet clear when the vaccine is going to be made available to vulnerable children, but Bradley's family say he'll have it as soon as he can. It's been too long since he was allowed out to play. Geraint Vincent, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News. What success can Team GB achieve at the Winter Olympics? Plus tributes to Truly Scrumptious after the death of actor Sally Ann Howes.
Such a kind,
lovely, beautiful person.
Those stories and more after this very short break. Welcome back. Online influencers found themselves in trouble again today. In case you didn't know, these are people who make a living being the social media trendsetters of the day. As Sangeeta Lal reports, problems arise when influencing strays across the line into advertising.
They have millions of followers and can earn big money promoting brands online. But influencers like Vicky Patterson and Scotty T have previously been blacklisted by regulators for failing to make it clear when their posts are adverts. And today, Charlotte Dawson and former Geordie Shore star Chloe Ferry had these posts banned after repeated warnings they were breaking the rules. For others in the industry, though, like lifestyle blogger Sasha Wilkins, she says there should be tougher penalties for those who mislead their followers.
The bottom line is those lifestyles are unattainable unless they're underwritten by free products or commercial affiliations. So I think it's important that influencers tell their followers when they're being paid to put something online.
And for those who do, it's clear to see why. Footballer Cristiano Ronaldo is the top earner on Instagram, making an average of £1.2 million per post. Singer Dua Lipa is the highest paid Brit. She earns more than £300,000 a post, while former Love Island contestant Molly May Hague averages £17,000. But with so much money to be made, facing fines isn't necessarily the biggest deterrent.
What we do is take action to have problem ads removed and to prohibit them from appearing again.
Does that actually work though? Because the number of influencers who are flouting social media rules keeps going up year on year.
There's more work to do. We're absolutely open about the fact that it's about education and awareness.
Needed as more people aim to be the next social media star. Finding their own niche and their new fans, they'll have to remember to follow the rules too. Sangeeta Lal, ITV News.
The Manchester City player and France international Benjamin Mendy was charged with another count of rape when he appeared in court in Chester today. The 27-year-old, who's been held in custody since his arrest in August, now faces 7 counts of rape and 1 of sexual assault relating to 5 women. The Chelsea owner Roman Abramovich has received an apology from the book giant HarperCollins for publishing claims he bought the club on Vladimir Putin's orders. All the publishers have amended the book and agreed to a charitable donation. And a man who admitted stalking BBC presenter Louise Minchin has been sentenced to more than 2 years in prison. Ex-soldier Carl Davies used social media to send threatening messages. With final preparations underway for Britain's competitors at February's controversial Beijing Winter Olympics, the head of Team GB has been speaking to ITV News. Georgina Harland says the athletes are aware of the human rights issues that have overshadowed the Games, but as she told our China correspondent Debbie Edward, their focus is on winning a record medal haul for Britain.
In the mountains of Zhangjiakou, people are enjoying the ski runs that will soon be the realm of the world's top Olympic athletes. Getting to these games for Team GB might be harder than the actual competing. Qualifying will go right down to the wire next month, and then there's the pandemic and China's strict COVID regulations to contend with. The head of the British team is confident the Games will go ahead as planned.
You know, we will be more competitive across more disciplines than ever before. And I think what that gives is the public back home something to get behind, irrespective of what you're interested in. There'll be something for everybody.
The UK has joined allied nations in a diplomatic boycott of the Games. They have taken a stand over China's human rights record. Team GB says its athletes won't be drawn into the politics, but won't be stopped from commenting if they wish to do so.
The athletes are aware of the political situation.
The Olympic champion, can she make history and win it again?
At the last Winter Olympics, the team took home 5 medals. More money than ever is being spent on improving that tally.
In Winter Olympic history.
It's here on the slopes that Team GB will be hoping for some major medal success. Investment in snow sports has risen from 2 million in 2014 to over 11 million for these games in Beijing.
Snowboarding and Charlotte Banks are the ones to watch. She is currently dominating the field in her event.
Charlotte Banks, you know, she's world champion. She's just won another gold at the World Cup of the weekend. You know, it is a challenging time across the world, and I think we need to recognise that. But I think sport is just such a vehicle.
Those coming to China to compete are hoping it will be the sport that shines and delivers a much-needed lift in spirits. Debbie Edward, ITV News, Beijing.
Finally, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the story about a magical car, became a film that seized the imagination of children and adults around the world. So it's little wonder the death of one of its stars, the English-born actor Sally Ann Howes, has been met with an outpouring of affectionate tributes. Rebecca Barry reports.
Truly scrumptious, you too are truly scrumptious. Scrumptious as the breeze across the bay.
She brought magic to childhoods across generations. Sally Ann Howes, best known for playing Truly Scrumptious in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Chitty bang bang, chitty chitty bang bang, chitty bang bang, chitty chitty bang bang.
The actress, whose career spanned 6 decades, has died, aged 91.
And I like your car.
Adrian Hall, who played Jeremy Potts in the film, among those now paying tribute.
Huge part of my life. I've known her since I was 8. Such a kind, lovely, beautiful person who always had time for everybody and who always made everybody feel comfortable. The world is a slightly emptier place without knowing that she's there.
Born in 1930 in northwest London, Sally Ann's career began as a teenager when she appeared in the film Thursday's Child.
Well, if I could really do the part, because if it wasn't a bit like me, I shouldn't know what to do. I'd make a fool of myself.
Aren't we to go?
She was nominated for a Tony Award for her performance in the 1963 musical Brigadoon. But it will always be Chitty Chitty Bang Bang for which she's best remembered. She apparently did this famous scene in a single take. As usual, the film will be shown on Christmas Day. Her family thought she might see it one last time, but she died on Sunday.
She was my adoptive mother, and my mother died when I was 11. And she took on the role totally and was always there for us. I'm thankful that she gave so many people so much, especially myself.
They say she's now reunited with her husband of 48 years, who died earlier this year.
Sally Ann Howes, who has died at the age of 91. And that is all for now. Raggy is back with news at 10, but from me and all of the team here, bye-bye.